Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to SFF180 and a new episode in my series, Reading the Hugos, where, in case you couldn't tell, I've decided against going in strict chronological order for the awards and am instead just jumping around through the years as the mood takes me. Today, we're looking at 2010, a year that resulted in a rare Best Novel tie. And one of those winners was The City and the City, which at that point in his career was China Miéville's tightest and most politically observant novel. It's existential pulp fiction, a hard-boiled detective story set in an alternate reality that feels like a John le Carré fever dream. It's got murders, conspiracies, secrets, red herrings, action, and suspense to burn. And it's all upholstered in big ideas about nationalism, cultural identity, the fear of absolute authority, the perceived threat of borders and their violability, and the overpowering irrationality of xenophobia. China Miéville has always been fixated on cities. New Crobuzon and Unlondon are characters as vivid as the diverse natives who amble their living streets, if not more so. But to Miéville, cities are defined by their people, not their geography. Cities can be anywhere, and they don't necessarily have to stay put. Both Miéville's earlier books, The Scar and Iron Council, take place in vagabond cities that travel the landscape, founded by outcasts and undesirables who have evolved their own form of nomadic urbanity. But while turf may not be especially important to Miéville, he fully understands how important it is to people in the real world, their sense of identity and place, the need to put down roots, to define this place as one's home, is etched into our being. Nationalism is much on the minds of people who feel their borders are being challenged and threatened. Recent history is full of the agony and the anger that accompany the politics of division. Set in the present day, The City and the City gives us two fictitious Eastern European city-states, Basel and Ulcoma, and they're fighting over not merely a shared border, but literally the same little patch of reality. The cities exist on top of one another, like two superimposed film images. Sometime in the distant past, an event called the Cleavage somehow split this little slice of the planet into two realities. We don't know what happened or how, and it isn't the goal of the story to explore the science of it. The citizens of Basel and Ulcoma must be the most neurotic people alive. By law, they must choose to ignore, to unsee those parts of each other's cities that occasionally intrude on their own. Like, you can be in either Basel or Ulcoma, but whichever of the two cities you inhabit, you have to be careful of those cross-hatched areas of the city where bits of the other city are more visible than not. A person in Basel can be walking the sidewalk right next to someone in Ulcoma. They are side by side, but a whole city and a whole reality away, and they can't acknowledge each other. Violations of this bizarre boundary are considered breach and harshly punished by a shadowy Orwellian law enforcement body who somehow exist independently and above both cities, who possess frighteningly omniscient surveillance powers and apparently limitless punitive ones. It seems like being marched away by man-in-black types you didn't know existed, who materialize out of thin air and they know everything about you. Feels like a distinctly post-war European horror. But this doesn't stop both cities from developing the expected rebel countercultures. Left-wing unificationists who favor the assimilation of both cities duke it out with right-wing nationalists. Perhaps the fact they keep each other busy and are already well policed by each city's own law enforcement bodies is why the fearsome breach mostly leaves them alone. All the same, it's hard to understand why breach is so punitive, or what exactly would be so drastically damaged by more of an open border policy here. This is not a plot flaw, it's quite deliberate. Miéville is examining the way nationalism just gets raised to the point where xenophobic fanaticism is enshrined as policy for its own sake. Unlike a lot of border conflicts in our world, there's no deep-seated religious or political or cultural divide that separates the Bez and the Ulcomans through implacable prejudice and hate. The citizens of either city don't really seem to have a problem with one another. They maintain their strict separation, because few people want to bother to question the systems under which they're governed. I don't see how either city can possibly be a happy place to live, but the locals seem to manage. Ignoring crosshatching gets to be just another exercise in willful blindness, kind of like stepping over homeless people on the sidewalk. And besides, Ulcoma and Bezel do interact, and there is a legal way to travel from one to the other through a tunnel beneath the central government building with the bizarrely suggestive name of Copula Hall. And both cities also interact with the outside world to varying degrees. Though it contains none of the baffling creatures and very little of the steampunk gearpunk trappings of Perdido Street Station, The City in the City offers us a world no less vivid, and even more disarming for its clear analogies to so much political reality. The plot itself is a deliciously convoluted police procedural, a kind of CSI Miéville, in which a simple murder mushrooms into a potential international catastrophe, when a Canadian student working on an archaeological dig in Ulcoma turns up dead in Bezel. Detectives from both cities working together uncover what looks like the proverbial conspiracy with leads going straight to the top. The killing was committed in such a way as to carefully avoid committing breach. As the list of suspects comes together and the stakes become clearer, it appears the victim learned something she shouldn't have, something that could threaten the precarious existence of both cities. At just over 300 pages, The City and the City was Miéville's shortest book at the time, and also his most efficiently constructed and fast-paced. And the socio-political themes it explores make it doubly rewarding. Would it be better for one of the other of these cities to fall? Or for them both to unite? Or for them to just continue business as usual, two entire populations living elaborately constructed lies for the sake of what? Patriotism? Cultural autonomy and pride? You won't find easy answers where none are possible. And there you have it. That's all I have time for on this episode of SFF180. Now, I have simultaneously uploaded my review of the other winning novel for 2010, Paolo Bacigalupi's The Wind-Up Girl, a very different and much more divisive novel, but one that I consider excellent in its own right, so go check that out. 2010 had a strong Best Novel ballot, and because the two winners were each so good on their own terms, I'm not going to argue against either of them winning, but an equally deserving nominee was Robert Charles Wilson's masterful Julian Comstock, a book unlike anything else Wilson has ever done. Otherwise, you guys know the drill. These are reviews. You will not always agree with me, but if you enjoyed watching, please hit that like button, share the video far and wide with all of your SFF reading friends, and above all, please subscribe. If you have not done so, that is how the channel grows. You can also support the channel at my TeePublic store and my Patreon, where recruits in the Winx Army get little perks like occasionally getting early access on some of my videos if I manage to finish them early enough. But I do want to thank those folks for their added support. It is greatly appreciated. I use my Patreon money to pay Matt Olson, my wonderfully talented channel artist who does all of my amazing thumbnails and animations for me. So again, that assistance is greatly appreciated. Thanks very much. I want to thank all the rest of you guys for being the very best viewers in all of BookTube, and until I see all of you next time, stay safe and healthy, and happy reading.